Before we continue in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, first of all, good morning, everyone, and continue to daven for the safety of our soldiers and hostages and of our fellow classmates. Avram ben Nissen HaKohen. Okay, so before we continue in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch in chapter 472, we're going to look at the Rebbe's Haggadah, which you have in the page there, yeah. So yesterday we learned that there are certain times when there's an absolute requirement to recline during the Seder night, namely the 3 obligatory matzahs, the matzah, the afikoman, and the koirach, the sandwich, and the 4 cups of wine. Those are your 4 times one is required to recline, the wine and the 3 matzahs. Now, as for the rest of the meal, said the Shulchan Aruch, you don't have to. You want to, you may, and it'd be wonderful if you did. If you did, this is praiseworthy, as we explained, because at least from one perspective, which we'll discuss more tomorrow, the mitzvah to recline is an outbirth of the general attitude that one is supposed to demonstrate freedom tonight. And if there's an obligation to demonstrate freedom, it's not limited to any point in the Seder. You're always supposed to project freedom in the way you dress, in the way the table is set. So also the way you sit, recline. So there are times when you're required to recline. But if you decide to recline at other points in the Seder, good for you. Okay. So if you did, beautiful. If you did recline during other points in the Seder, other points of the meal. What about karpas? Should one be reclining by karpas? It's not part of the meal. What would you say? Well, Mora, we don't recline because it's a demonstration of our enslavement, not our freedom. So you don't recline then. The 4 times you do recline, the matzahs and the wine, because it does demonstrate our freedom. The rest of the meal, if you want to. And it'd be nice if you did. Karbas, dipped in salt water. So it seems like maybe it's a demonstration of our not freedom.
It's really just to elicit questions.
It's to elicit questions. So where does it stand? In which of the 3 categories? Don't recline? Required to recline? Well, it wasn't listed. Or
I would say voluntary.
Voluntary. So let's see then. Yeah, very good. I was saying that's very good. So looking at the Rebbe's Haggadah, that is to say the commentary of the Rebbe on the Haggadah, the left column in the single page that you have there, in the left column, the paragraph begins with karpas. So it's below the line, the 3rd paragraph begins the word bekarpas. Here. Big karpas, that one. So, as I explained, the Rebbe's Haggadah is a commentary to the Alter Rebbe's Haggadah, right? Just briefly to refresh our memory, the Alter Rebbe compiled a siddur, and like any good siddur of the old day, it includes all the liturgy for all year round, but you include a machzor and include Haggadah. And siddur, a siddurim, a good siddur, besides for the text of what you're supposed to say, but also have little instructions. Stand here, sit here, this out loud, this quietly, things of that nature. When it comes to the Haggadah, there's even more instructions. Pick up your cup here, put it down here, cover your matzah here, pick up your matzah here, all these instructions. Right? So there was commenting on the instruction given at karpas.
Just to understand correctly, the Rebbe came out with his own Haggadah, which is essentially a commentary on the Alter Rebbe.
Correct. So it's a commentary on the Alter Rebbe's Haggadah. It's a running commentary on the Alter Rebbe's Haggadah, which, as the name of the Rebbe's commentary is, it's a collection of customs and reasons. So the Haggadah is more like sources for where everything comes from, commentary on practice, and answers to basic questions. It's in some ways like a Rashi, almost like a Rashi, which it has layers of meaning, but on its plain surface level is just there to collect. Like Rashi is like a collection of Medrash and Gemara commentary on the Chumash. That's what Rashi is. It's you could call it a collection. It's just collecting from the Gemara and inserting the relevant places. But if you unpack Rashi, you see the manner in which he collects and the way in which he phrases and the way in which he puts it. There's much more going on than just simply collecting commentary. It's very similar. The Rebbe style is very similar. He's collecting reasons for different things in Haggadah, collecting commentary and collecting custom practice things. But when you unpack them, there's a lot of depth. In our pre-Pesach Haggadah series, we did a little bit of those unpacking. I think God willing will do it again this year. Okay, so here's the commentary on the instruction at Karpas. Now, the instruction in Karpas says that when you make the bracha on the Karpas, Hadama, you should have in mind the Marar. Right? Karpas at the beginning of your Seder. Kaddish Orchatz, you make Kiddush, you wash your hands in preparation for the Karpas, and then you eat the Karpas. And then you take a break, not a break, but you don't eat anymore because you're now reading Haggadah, and then you go to washing your hands, eating matzah, and then Marar. So when it comes to the Marar, you don't make Hadama. You just make a bracha thanking Hashem for the mitzvah of eating Marar. But Hadama you don't recite. The reason is because when you made Hadama on the Karpas, you had in mind the Marar. Okay? So first the Rebbe comments and says, explaining that the recitation of the Haggadah does not constitute an interruption between the two vegetables, the vegetable of Karpas and the vegetable of Marar, and therefore the bracha Hadama can extend from the Karpas all the way till the Marar. That's the first thing he says. Then he says, remember also to have in mind the Marar of the sandwich, not just the plain Marar. And now, in the context of comparing the Karpas to the Marar, the Rebbe makes the following comment. Okay? That's right. The Karpas, with respect to Karpas, Loit Ziyin, the Alter Rebbe does not remark in the Siddur, whether you should be reclining, or without reclining, as it states with respect to Marar. So whenever the one is required to recline, the Alter Rebbe's instructions in his Haggadah would say, recline here, drink while reclining, or eat it reclining. When it comes to Marar, it says, don't recline. And when it comes to Karpas, it doesn't say either. It doesn't say recline, nor does it say not to recline. Why not? So it says there, the Yesh Leimar, we might suggest, the dinoi, that the law of Karpas is, Kamoy Shar Hasuda Delailazeh, like all the other food items of this night. Namely, Darashus Biyadai. The choice is yours. Shlai Lahasev. If you don't want, you don't have to recline. But Mason, one who reclines, Harezim Meshubach, it's praiseworthy. Right? And he puts in the parentheses citation to what we just learned yesterday, section 472, subsection 14 of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, which we learned yesterday, where he says, here are the 4 times when you have to recline, the 3 matzahs and the wine. The rest of the time, if you want to, you can. Actually, the rest of the meal, if you want to, you can. So there is understanding that the Karpas is in the category of, if you want, you can choose. As opposed to what one might say is, because you're dipping into salt water, there's an element of reclining, there's an element of bitter, and therefore the bondage, right? And therefore don't recline like Marar. One could make that case. But by omitting the instruction not to recline, the Alter Rebbe omits that. The Rebbe is learning that means it's like everything else in the meal. If you want to, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. And therefore, the light seeing, the Alter Rebbe only remarks, only in times when the obligation or the exemption is absolute. Like the exemption at Marar, I should say, like the language is interesting, exemption. It should say like the exemption. It's like an absolute. Don't recline here. And therefore, it's up for grabs in terms of just like everything else in the meal, where if you want to, you can recline or not to. And now what's our practice then? What's our custom? And now our custom is to eat it without reclining. just as it is our custom not to recline during the meal. Even though the Alter Rebbe writes in the Shulchan Aruch that it's praiseworthy to recline during the meal. You want to, you don't have to, but if you want to, you could, and it's beautiful. Our custom is not to. We learned that the Rebbe puts that into, I don't have the paper anymore, but we learned that the Rebbe writes by the Shulchan Aruch that our custom is not to recline during the meal. We only recline during these 4 times.
That presumably would include.
So if karpas is in the same category as the rest of the meal, then if our custom would be you don't have to. Now, in concluding remarks in a separate paragraph, the Rebbe continues. With respect, most commentaries are of the view that during karpas, one doesn't need to recline. Yes. And then it puts 1, 2, 3 sources and then says, and there are more, and then writes, and this is not like the Beis David. I'm not sure what the Beis David does say. I thought it was Beis David. Look it up. Okay, I have to look up 2 things now. I have to look up yesterday about what was it? I started to look it up, remember? What was it? Jog my memory.
Right.
Oh, in subsection 13. What does it mean to be exempt? Yeah, the exemption. Yeah. You have to look up that.
What source was that? What was the source?
We have to look up that, and we have to look up now the views that say yes, recline or don't recline with respect to karpas. Okay, so that is, at least as far as our custom goes, and where the Rebbe places the idea of karpas. But the Shulchan Aruch only refers to the rest of the meal, doesn't refer to karpas. And the Rebbe is learning by omission that karpas is to be considered like the rest of the meal, in which one can choose whether they should recline or not. And our custom is not to recline, even though the Shulchan Aruch says it'd be praiseworthy too.
I think it was,
which means that someone who's not practicing Chabad custom, but wanted to follow the Alter Rebbe, like if one wasn't following the tradition that's passed down in Chabad practice, but wanted to follow the Alter Rebbe's just ruling, which was intended to be universal, meaning universal outside just Chabad, then one should recline by the karpas, because it's praiseworthy to do so. Whereas maybe some of the other commentaries might say actually don't recline.
I guess it follows what they do during the meals.
Exactly. So if you like Alter Rebbe says in the Shulchan Aruch that during the meal you can recline and it's praiseworthy, and the same thing would be by karpas. Yeah. If we're understanding the Rebbe's understanding, meaning right. Whereas the Rebbe concludes with comments and say that there are many halachic authorities that say not to recline, or at least that says it doesn't need reclining, which might mean
means it's also voluntary. Doesn't need that.
Or it could be more like morar. We'll have to look those up.
Well, morar is
you shouldn't recline. Right. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let's go back now to the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, chapter subsection 14 of chapter 472. I'm sorry, chapter 15. This halacha 15, halacha tezvav, is now going to be like the prelude to what we're going to be learning tomorrow, which is the Rebbe's famous sikha, the Rebbe's famous commentary and talk and essay on the nature of the mitzvah of heseba, which we kept on referencing, in which the Rebbe discusses whether the mitzvah to recline is a general mitzvah for the whole night, or is it a mitzvah that's born out of the obligation to eat matzah in a manner of reclining, the obligation to drink wine in a manner of reclining, or is it a general mitzvah tonight, recline, that you happen to play out at these times, matzah and wine. And as we're going to learn, it's a combination of both. And what we're reading today is really going to be the setup for that. Okay. Halacha tezvav, kol mi shetzarich lahasiv, anyone who's required to recline, as opposed to those who were exempt earlier, a person in front of a teacher, women or whatnot. Those who are required, but those who are required to recline, and ate or drank without reclining, as far as the letter of the law goes, this person would be required to eat again and recline. It doesn't say what food you're eating. It doesn't say matzah or wine. It just says a person is required to recline when eating and doesn't recline, has to eat again to recline. This is going to be a big discussion in the Rebbe's talk tomorrow. What are we talking about here? What do we mean? Which food items are we talking about? We'll leave that alone for now. The point is that as far as the law goes, you have an obligation to recline. You didn't, so you got to go do it again. Just like anything, a person failed to do the mitzvah properly, you got to do it again.
Yeah,
right?
Talk about wine either. Does you have to drink wine again?
Everybody's going to unpack that, and we'll see a little bit more soon as well. Yeah, but everybody's going to unpack all that. That's a good point. But as far as the law goes, you failed your obligation to recline. Do it again so you can recline.
Fifth cup.
Sorry?
Fifth cup.
So let's see. Aval but because there's a view which we cited to earlier, that nowadays one doesn't need to recline at all in our countries. We explained before that there's a view which says that the whole notion of reclining is a subjective thing. Reclining is meant to demonstrate your freedom. Well, you have to see if reclining actually demonstrates freedom. And today, when we sit on chairs upright all year long, even the greatest of noblemen don't recline. So there's a view that says, well, the whole reclining is off the table anyway, because it doesn't demonstrate anything. Maybe it demonstrates that you're a little uncomfortable. Kidding. But it doesn't demonstrate freedom per se. Okay, we don't follow that view, at least the men. And we say, look, reclining is an absolute obligation, and therefore we recline. Because it's an established demonstration of freedom. Even if the societal practice is not so. But there is a view which says that reclining today is not obligation. Right? So now you're in doubt. You missed reclining. If the law of reclining is still true today, you got to do it again so you can recline. But if the obligation isn't true today, then what's the point of doing it again? Right? And therefore he says, and therefore you can rely on this opinion, in regards to Shabbat Evet, if post factum, you fulfilled your obligation even though you haven't reclined. Okay, so now that we understand it's not an absolute obligation to redo the reclining. It's only an absolute obligation if you have the view that's an absolute requirement to recline. But it's not an absolute requirement to recline because there's a view that says the whole reclining is out today. So now, if you decide to be stringent and do it again in order to recline, you have to make sure that when you're doing that, you're not undermining any other laws. Because the moment you're undermining any other laws, then it's not a stringency anymore. You're taking a stringency in one law while being lenient in another. If it's an absolute requirement that you have to recline, then if you didn't recline, the obligation round one was never done. So do it again.
It's almost like this. You compare this idea with the idea of the exemption people. Talked about yesterday, right?
Very similar.
Number 13.
Very, very similar, yeah. Because
now they're exempt. No, first instance you should have done it, but if you haven't, you didn't
correct.
do it, you're exempt. And if you do it, it's like
being commoner.
You're a commoner.
Yeah. So here it's similar, but the main point here is that you have to be sure that if you decide to be stringent and redo it, you have to be sure you're not inadvertently undermining other laws. If you didn't fulfill your obligation time one, then you have to do it again because you didn't fulfill your obligation. But nowadays, it's possible you did fulfill your obligation because the whole thing to recline wasn't the thing. And therefore, when you redo it again, you have to be sure that you aren't inadvertently undermining other laws. What would those other laws be? Let's see. Okay? So, when it comes to the matzah eating, it'd be good to be stringent, to go back, to eat it reclined. Okay, so you ate matzah, you forgot to recline. You're halfway through your meal, or any time later, and you realize, hey, I didn't recline. So if you now eat matzah and recline, what do you need to do? Just eat matzah and recline. So no harm, no foul. So if you want to be, so it's good. Go be stringent and eat it again. Because you're anyways eating matzah again in your meal. Or at least you're allowed to, certainly if you want to. So then go ahead and recline. Why not?
That's not exactly the same. You're not doing it during the time you were obligated.
Okay, so at least you do it in the right order,
Right,
but the
no.
mitzvah of matzah was done, And the mitzvah of reclining was done. So he ate it again. What's the big deal? Now, the same thing is true with respect to the second cup. If you inadvertently drank the second cup without reclining. So what comes right after the second cup? The meal. Well, matzah and mara and meal. And again, during the meal, you're allowed to drink wine? Absolutely. So then no harm, no foul. Drink another, Yasser used to Beseba, go drink another cup of wine and leaning, reclining. Who cares? The main point here is because you're not required to make another paragofen at this juncture. Because the bracha of paragofen should be berech al kosheni, which you recited over the second cup. Right? Our custom is we make a hagafen of all 4 cups. We'll get to that later about why we do 4 hagafens, but we do 4 hagafens. So hagafen number 2, and cup number 2, covers all the wine we're going to be drinking in that meal. Right? So berachas hagafen sheberach al kosheni, the bracha hagafen which you recited on cup number 2, shusamach l'soda, which is right before your meal. It covers even the wine that's in the meal. As explained in chapter 470, in chapter 174, where there it discusses the laws of drinking wine prior to a meal and whether it covers the wine in the meal. And the classic example is Kiddush, where you make Kiddush knowing you're about to go into a meal with the intention that you're going to be continuing drinking in the meal. That's at least the presupposition. Then the hagafen of your Kiddush covers the hagafen and the wine in your meal, even though in between you're going to be washing and making a motzi. So here too, on cup number 2, you're making hagafen. You know you're going to a meal. You know you might be drinking wine in the meal. The hagafen covers that, even though that in between you're going to be washing and eating matzah. And therefore, no harm, no foul. During the meal, pick up another cup of wine, drink it, and lean to your left. Okay.
So there's a timing issue here, whether or not you're going to be violating other laws.
Which means in the other cups, you might accidentally be violating other laws because you might be forced to make a hagafen. And let's see what the problem with doing that is. Okay. But imshasa kois rishon, the person drank the first cup, oy shlishi or the third cup, oy revi or the fourth cup. The loy has seba without reclining. Ein loy lachzer v'l'shtoyse b'seba. One should not go back and drink it again reclining. Right? The fee because you'd have to go back and make a bracha again. Why?
After the
first, third, and fourth. He's going to go through one by one. Why is that? Because nowadays, it's not our practice, not our way to be drinking between the first and second cup. The first and second cup, you're reading the Haggadah. We don't drink any wine then. Okay? We're going to learn about that in the next halacha, right? This is the last halacha on the discussion of reclining. The next set of halachas is about the halachas of the four cups of wine. We're going to learn the Gemara and get to that later. So we'll learn soon about this idea of not drinking between cup 1 and 2. But we don't at the point. And likewise, between cup number 3, which is after your benching. Right? The first cup of wine, you make Kiddush. The second cup of wine is there as you recite the Haggadah. From there, you launch into your meal. Your Hagafen is covered there. Then you hold a cup of wine over which you recite the benching. And then you drink a third cup of wine. After you drink a third cup of wine, you fill up your fourth one and recite the Hallel and drink the second, bring that. Now, between 3 and 4, which is basically throughout the Hallel, it's actually by law prohibited from drinking, which is even more stringent than between cup 1 and 2. Cup 1 and 2, if you cut the nuance, he said that now we don't drink between cup 1 and 2. But between 3 and 4, it's actually forbidden to drink. As we'll learn chapter 479 when we get to the laws of the third and fourth cup. Okay, so between cup 1 and 2, one shouldn't drink. We don't. Between 3 and 4, one is not allowed to drink. Okay, that's what we're saying. Hallel. Third cup of wine you hold while benching, and you drink after benching, and then you recite Hallel and drink a fourth cup. So between 3 and 4, which comes during Hallel, which is right after benching till the end of the Seder, it's not just Hallel, it's It's halal, but you go to halal nirtza. Yeah, you go to the you go to the door for shvei chamascha before benching for Elio. No, after benching, right? After benching and then halal. That section. So we don't drink. We're not allowed to drink between 3 and 4. The same thing is true of after the 4th cup of wine, which is the last thing you're consuming on the night of the Seder, the 4th cup of wine after you say Lashon Haba Yerushalayim, right? Asta lishtos. Oh, one may not drink at all. As we'll learn in chapter 481, where it discusses that after 4 cup of wine, one doesn't drink anything. Right? Which means after 1, after 3, and after 4, you may not be drinking. Okay, if so, therefore, at any point when you drink one of these 3 cups of wine without reclining, and afterwards, you remember that you drank without reclining, and you want to go now and drink again, this means you just changed your mind. Initially, you weren't going to drink, and now you are going to drink. And consequently, it's ordered, therefore you're required to go back and make another cup. Right? Follow that? The only time
between 1, 3, and 4.
The only time when you make a bracha, let's look at footnote 67, explains it, yeah?
Oh, when it's extended.
That's right. He reads in 67, for he had diverted his attention from drinking further after drinking the cup of wine. Therefore, if he would drink again to rectify his error, drinking without reclining, he would be required to recite another bracha. Right? When you made a bracha on cup number 2, you knew you were drinking more in your meal. So when you drink another cup now, recline, that bracha is covered. But after cup 1 and cup 3 and cup 4, actually your expectation was not to drink, considering the prohibitions from drinking, or just the practice of not drinking. And therefore, your bracha on the cup number 1 does not extend to anything you're drinking between 1 and 2, because you're actually not planning on. And now you decide you want to drink. You have to make a new bracha. Just like in the middle of a meal. If a guy says, okay, it's my last cup of wine, drinks it. Then he's pressured by the Farbrengen and drinks another one. He has to make another bracha. Because initially he closed his drinking, and now he decides to drink again, new bracha.
Tend to drink 2 cups, 1, 3, and 4.
The assumption is you don't have that intent.
No, you don't, but if you do, then you can make a bracha.
Then you wouldn't make a bracha.
You would make a new bracha.
If you had intent?
If you had intent to want to drink.
Between 1 and 3?
Yeah.
Well, how could you? We'll see in a second. Actually, maybe you could. We'll see in a second. Yeah.
All right.
But you're right.
Okay, now I'm just trying to understand.
Right. But the assumption is you don't have that in mind. Because the assumption is,
sure, yeah, you don't,
right? What's the default? Exactly. What's the default? The default is, let me put it this way, a person's not aware of all the details of halachas. But what's his default when he makes any bracha at the Seder? His default is, I am intentionally doing whatever the Seder of the Haggadah instructs me to do. That's the default. Right? So the default is, when I drink cup number 1, even if I'm not conscious of it, my default is, I don't plan on drinking between 1 and 2 because it's not there in the instruction. Right? Between 2 and 3, the assumption is I am going to drink because why not? I'm having a meal. Yeah. And the instruction is drink as you wish. And therefore, no bracha required between 2 and 3 if you drink more. And therefore, go ahead, drink another cup of wine if you missed reclining. But after cup 1, if you fail to recline, you would have to make another bracha. Now, what's the problem with making another bracha? Go ahead, make another bracha. Who cares? The problem is, it would seem as though you added to the number of brachas, to the number of cups that our sages enacted. Our sages said 4, and you're drinking a 5th. So the declaration of the bracha in another cup of wine is almost as if like you're doing more, and that's already not allowed. If we follow the view that said reclining is an absolute requirement, then when you drank cup number 1 without reclining, it's as if you never drank the first cup. So then you can make another bracha and drink the 4th cup, the cup leaning. And it would only seem like you did 4 because the first one didn't count at all. But because there's a view which says that the first one does count, even if you don't recline, because there's a view that says reclining is out the window, so you're only doing it on doubt, Now, when you do it on that and drink another cup, you inadvertently ruin another law, which is don't add to the Sage's enactment the 4 cups. And you just added a fifth by making another bracha. When you drink another cup of wine during the meal leaning to your left, it doesn't seem as though you added a cup because everybody's drinking wine anyway. Right? And what's the indication that everybody's drinking a cup of wine anyway? Because you're not making a bracha.
They're independent mitzvahs in that sense. Wine drinking, even though it was in some ways tied.
This is where, that's right. This is where the Rebbe's talk is going to become all pointed. Is it independent from the mitzvah of drinking the wine, or is it part of the mitzvah of drinking wine? And here it almost seems like it is part of the mitzvah of drinking wine, because if you were to make another bracha, then you're adding a 5th cup. Can't do that. And therefore, Toiv Yoser, be better, not to go back and drink it again. And therefore, listener, to rely on those who say, nowadays, there's no obligation to recline at all. Okay, question for you. I don't necessarily have the answer. Taking all the logic we just said, a guy missed cup number 1. Missed reclining. So he can't make another bracha now between 1 and 2 to fix it. What if I only remembered after cup 2?
You said before, after cup 2.
So why not do that?
Well, he could.
If I miss cup 1,
he could.
That doesn't say that. That said if you miss reclining cup 2, you can drink another cup of wine because why not? But after cup 1, don't do another bracha. Don't do another cup because it's going to be making another bracha. Why not just delay that extra cup that I'm adding to the meal time and then I'll have it then? Presumably, I don't see a problem with it based on the logic here. It's just I don't understand why that doesn't play it out.
He started off that.
He started off only if you missed the 2nd cup.
Yeah, right.
Well, I'm asking if you missed the 1st cup. You missed reclining in the 1st cup. So now I cannot drink any wine between cup 1 and 2, even though I made a mistake. So by cup 2, I'll make the bracha, recline, and then during the meal, recline, making up for cup 1. Why can't I do that?
Well, then in that case, you're getting to the issue of are they independent mitzvot or are they together mitzvot? If they're together mitzvot, then you can't do that.
Yeah, and the problem would be
because that cup you didn't fulfill the obligation of reclining for that particular.
The main point is it might be a problem of drinking the cups out of order.
Drinking the cups out of order. Because
I drank number 2 reclining, and now I'm drinking another cup making up for cup 1. So I drank cup 2, then 1, then 3, then 4.
Is there a bracha? Is the person making a bracha
on cup 1?
No. Forget about it.
No, he's not. Because the bracha issue you say you're not allowed to do. But what can I make up for cup 1 between 2 and 3? Or can I? Between 2 and 3, I'm allowed to drink. It's a meal time. So I can drink. The problem would be you might be out of order.
Because you're waiting for the makeup of wine.
And therefore you're drinking cup 2, then 1, then 3, then 4. And that might be a problem, as we're going to learn when we get to the laws of the 4 cups of wine.
Even without a bracha.
Even without a bracha. It could be a out of order problem.
If you say that the mitzvah of reclining
is a part and parcel of the mitzvah of wine. The mitzvah of wine. That's right. And that would then mean that I drank the cup out of order.
Yeah. Because you're doing for 2 what you should be doing for 1.
That's right. And this we'll see more again tomorrow as we look in the Rebbe Sikha. Let's conclude quickly and to your point. Nevertheless, in the best case scenario, you should have in mind at the beginning of your whole requirement to recline. Before you're making a bracha on the first cup of wine, meaning at the beginning of the Seder, you have in mind that I have in mind to drink between cup 1 and 2. Between 3 and 4, I can't have that in mind because I'm not allowed to drink between 3 and 4. After 4, I can't have that in mind because I'm not allowed to drink after 4. But between 1 and 2, it's our custom not to drink between 1 and 2. Mm-hmm. So I could be 4 cup 1, same having in mind that I'm allowed to drink between cup 1 and 2. And then if you then inadvertently forgot to recline between 1 and 2, you can then drink between cup 1 and 2 again without a bracha reclining. And therefore it won't seem as if you're adding to the cups, because I fulfilled my obligation with cup 1 for the bracha. It's just like I'm drinking one long cup with a break in the middle.
Interesting.
So here's what happens. He begins to say there, he knows the law and says, okay, I'm having in mind that when I make this bracha now, it's covering anything I drink between cup 1 and 2. Even though I hope I don't have to drink between cup 1 and 2. And then between that thought process and the actual drinking of the wine, he forgot to recline. Meaning he went into habit mode, made Kiddush, sat down and drank without leaning. And then before he picks cup 2, he remembers, oh, I forgot to recline during cup 1. But because he had in mind earlier that the hagafen of cup 1 is going to cover any wine, he then picks up another cup of wine, doesn't make a bracha, and now reclines.
Wait, this is after cup 2?
No.
Oh,
Before cup 2.
I thought that's what you were
Then before cup 2, he reclines.
before cup 2.
Because he had in mind.
In the event
Oh, that's right. He had in mind. That's right. That's right. He had in mind. That's correct. He had in mind that the first cup was going to cover everything between cup 1 and 2. He forgot to recline. Remembers before cup 2. Takes another cup. Doesn't make a bracha because it was covered hagafen. Drinks and reclines. That, says the Alter Rebbe, does not seem as though you're adding to a 5th cup. Why? Because I didn't make a bracha hagafen. By the very fact that this cup of wine is being covered by the bracha of the first cup, seems as if these two cups of wine, the first cup of wine over Kiddush without reclining, and this new cup with reclining, it's like one long drinking session.
Right, under that one
bracha hagafen. Between cup 2 and 3, when I drink in the middle of the meal, it's even less apparent that I'm adding to the cups of wine because everybody's drinking.
But then if you forget,
but here it's only not apparent that I'm adding because it's covered by the same bracha hagafen.
But
Follow?
If you forget after, but if you forget after 2, you're done.
If I only remembered my lack of cup 1 after cup 2, but I don't know. Well, it would seem to me from the phrasing of the Alter Rebbe, where he doesn't say, "Hey, if you miss cup 1, just do it after cup 2," then it would seem like you're not allowed to. And presumably the reason is because we're going to see soon, the cups of wine have to be in order. That's right. Have to be in order.
Under that scenario you just mentioned, after cup 1, but before cup 2, is there an issue there that if people see you doing this at the Seder, there may be an issue?
That looks like you're adding?
Yeah,
that's why he says, the only reason why it doesn't look like you're adding is because you don't make hagafen. Our custom is to make hagafen on every single cup of wine. Every one of the 4 cups.
Yeah, okay.
So the fact that you didn't make hagafen is a way of saying, I'm just continuing my first one.
Okay.
Between 2 and 3, you don't even have to have that because everybody's drinking. It's a table of wine.
It's not a communal thing. It's an individual thing.
Right. Which means you have to be a scholar enough that before you make hagafen, you have to know, to have in mind that my hagafen of cup 1 is covering everything between 1 and 2. And then that same scholar who knew that law forgot to recline by cup 1. Because between that thought process and the actual drinking, he went into like habit Kiddush mode and just drank regularly. Yeah. Okay, so this now covers the laws of reclining. The second half of this chapter, from 16 going forward, is the laws of drinking the 4 cups of wine. So what we're going to do is tomorrow we're going to look at the sikha, a talk, the essay where Rebbe delves into the nature of the obligation to recline. Is it part and parcel of the mitzvahs of drinking wine, or is it just an overall mitzvah for the whole night that happens to be fulfilled during the cups of wine? And what's the difference if you think of these 2 different perspectives? We're going to look at that talk, which I kept on referencing. Then we're going to go back to the Gemara, which discusses the laws of drinking 4 cups of wine, and then we'll come back to the Shulchan Aruch, which discusses the laws of drinking 4 cups of wine.
Right.
Okay, wonderful day, Eden. We'll hear good news all around.
Amen.
Oops,